Hey everyone, let's talk about throwing punches. And not so much from the perspective of how to throw a specific punch, but more from the perspective of why to throw a punch in a certain way. So there's a lot of tutorials out there that are probably going to be better than what I can do in showing how to throw a jab and a cross combination, for example, or how to execute the punch itself. So this is more about the why to do certain things in a certain way to prevent injury. First thing to take into account is most of the time people that take on into any kind of a striking form of whether it's for fitness stuff or martial art training or whatever the case may be, most of the time they haven't done this, so the body is not ready for all the impact and all the hard training that it's going to go through. So we start working the proper technique of the actual punch, and what happens at the end of it is we have injury, wrist hurts, shoulder hurts, elbow hurts, or your hip or your foot, depending on how you're rotating, not rotating. Because once you make contact somewhere, that dispersion of the force goes somewhere. And if you don't have the proper structure or the proper strength to support that, that's how you get an injury. And not right away. Sometimes it is, unfortunately, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So let's approach the striking from a different perspective. Let's talk about how, not so much how to throw specifically step by step on the punch, for example. If you're in a fighting stance, we're talking about the cross, which is just better for you guys to see it from this perspective. We shift the weight, we drive, we push, we rotate, we extend the hand, and we make that punch. Correct. All the points are correct, even though I'm missing out on a couple of ones in there. But let's talk about what happens. For the most part, we have to also visualize the target that we're hitting. Or if we're lucky enough to have a partner that's working with us, that partner will be holding the target. So visually, we are judging the distance to be in the right range for the partner holding the target. The problem is now the target is several inches closer to the striker than it is to the holder. So if I turn sideways, if a striker was here, there'll be about the distance of my arm coming out that way, so that when they throw a punch, you can connect to my face. So that's where we start. And then I bring the pads up. Well, now I've cut that distance to half. So now the striker feels more jammed up. So visually, he's in the right range, but striking wise, he's in the wrong range. So then now, when we train the proper striking and you get the right movement and the right rotation, the hand does not have enough time to extend to perform the proper technique. And that is where the injury will happen. So the better way to look at it is to always take into account that little bit of extra space. And what happens is, let's say that if I take that pad and I bring it on my chest, now I'm cutting that distance from about 14 inches to only maybe like 3-4 inches. But even then, 3-4 inches brings it right up to about here, which is still just a little bit in front of the face. So if you're still throwing a proper punch and you're connecting with the proper rotation and extension, visually, once again, we're in the right range. Striking wise, we're in the wrong range. So now we're teaching ourselves that in that specific range, I have to rotate my punch right to that point where the pad would be. The problem is now what happens when I have to continue the extension. That is where we over rotate and we create an injury. So that's what this whole video is about, to correct that and prevent the injury from happening. So a better way to look at it is more of your traditional Wing Chun punches, which are more straight like this, because every punch that we do needs to start with the elbow dragging down as the body is moving into position to line it up in a straight line, at which point we extend, rotate it, and then recover it. So if we take out the rotation part, we are slightly closer, and that actually accounts for that range adjustment. So now, whether I'm throwing a jab, everything, all the proper mechanics are working step by step. I'm extending the jab minus that. But if I remove the pad from that position and my partner just waits and I slowly extend my hand with that rotation, I finish pretty close to perfect on my punch. And then the transition is exactly the same on the other side. I can stop it here, and if my partner removes to test my punch, the rotation should close that extra range and make the perfect connection to my actual target. So that is one of the biggest things to kind of worry about when you're striking. And then it also trains the technique longer term to be a little bit better and more efficient, in the sense that the one thing we do when we first start punching, we want to focus on power. So the elbows start coming up a little bit sooner. We create a bad habit. That traditional punch keeps the elbows a little bit lower, and you have to drag the elbow as long as possible before the extension and rotation happen anyways. So by training in that shorter range mindset, when your punches are here, you're teaching yourself to keep your elbows further down and dragging them before the extension happens. The second thing that happens is the structure of the wrist when you're making connection and impact. With the rotation, a lot of times we catch it wrong and the body continues moving, so you buckle the wrist a little bit and you get an injury. With a straight punch, that's a lot less likely to happen because your hand is already in a straight position. It really doesn't move and you don't have that adjustment where now things shift and come out of alignment. By keeping it and dragging it, you're just extending it like a piston, you strike, and then the hand recovers faster as well. So the wrist stays a little bit more secure. Now, why is that beneficial? For a new person who's taking on to striking arts, the bone structure and the density has not been used to this striking and resistance, and that is where there's a little bit of weakness in the wrist. So that's how the buckle happens. But by training this, everything strengthens over time. And for some it's faster, but let's, for an average perspective, just say 3 months roughly, to where you can feel a little bit of strength now, and you can pop that punch a little bit stronger. You can get a little bit more rotation out of it if you have the right range and you're working it that way. So it builds the body a little bit stronger, and that's what we want. We want to callus the body so it's strong, because every part of it is a weapon. I have to make sure that when I punch, my punch is the weapon. That there's nothing else that will get injured past that point. If I'm striking with my elbow, same context. I need to make sure that there is a strong weapon, not one that will break on impact. And we do it by slowly callousing and doing those microfractures and allowing the body to heal with that impact that we're doing as we go through the training and the progression. All right. Thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys in the next video.